Today, we're going to go over the top things that you need to know from one of the top defense attorneys here in Ohio about concealed carry. So let's get started. What's up, America? Neil here with Jogga Farms Academy. Thanks for watching. Today, I'm very honored to have a very distinguished guest with me, Ian Friedman. He's one of the top defense attorneys in Ohio. And today he's going to be talking to us about very important things that you need to know as a concealed carry person. Ian has a lot of experience with his firm with concealed carry issues and other firearm situations. So Ian, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for the viewers, Ian, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your firm?
Sure. So I've been practicing. Our office is in Cleveland for the last 20 years. We've got another office down in North Carolina. Our practice is really all over the state of Ohio. We are focused on criminal matters with federal and state matters. When it comes to firearms, we've really been very involved in those really since the beginning. I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I believe that firearm owners should be protected, and I'm glad that you're having me out here today because with being an owner of a firearm and someone who has a concealed permit, I always suggest to those people that they now have a greater responsibility. They really need to understand the law because I don't want viewers to come and visit. There's no need for it. There are enough criminals out there to keep the firm going. But responsible gun owners who make a mistake, I'm always upset when they end up in our office. And I've always felt that if someone who had the license knew some of these answers up front, they would never be in trouble. So that's really why I appreciate you having me here, and hopefully we can stop some people from getting into just some bad situations.
Excellent. So, Ian, what are the main issues that people come to see you for?
Sure. So people who have permits to carry firearms mostly come to us for, I would say, 5 things. People will come to the office and say, I just got arrested for one of these things. Number 1, they went to a bar, they were at a friend's house, and they got stopped. They had been drinking while having a firearm on them or about their person. That's problem number 1. Number 2, they got pulled over by an officer or were approached by an officer and did not state that they are concealed carry holders quickly enough and make it clear enough. And so that's number 2. Number 3, unfortunately, people think that it's okay. Usually we see road rage incidents where all of a sudden they'll take their gun and they'll kind of show it like this, to kind of get the person to go away. Or they'll, have a confrontation with someone and they'll kind of pull their shirt or their jacket back to show the gun. Big no-no also. Number 4, surprisingly, when this first happened, I thought, this will be the only time this happens. I've been surprised for a number of years now how many people take their weapon through the airport.
Really?
The metal detectors through the TSA.
Wow.
And they don't do it intentionally, of course. Usually what happens is they've packed the bag that they took their stuff to the range in and didn't realize that they left a small firearm in there as well. Number 5 would be going into an establishment where there's a sign posted that you can't bring a weapon in. And a lot of people know that they can't bring that weapon in, but they still do it anyway because it's concealed, and what's the chance of someone seeing it? And that's where we'll get into today kind of what we think you need to do if you're going to carry a lesson, because you get into printing and people being able to see that weapon and so forth. But going past those signs and then finding that you're charged with carrying a concealed weapon and you end up in jail. So those are really kind of the 5 typical ways that someone would end up in my office or another criminal defense lawyer's office.
Gotcha. So Ian, as a person that's going to be concealed carrying for the day and they're getting up to do their normal routine and getting ready for the day, is there some advice that you'd like to give them, something that they should be thinking about, some type of game plan perhaps, before they go out through their day?
Absolutely. So, Neil, I think that what's important is always keep in mind that you have a greater responsibility once you have gotten that concealed carry permit than you did before.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
You have a greater responsibility. You have to take greater steps to ensure the safety of yourself and others now. Okay. Right. The first thing that I always tell people is, in order to stay out of situations that could get you into hot water, that moment starts with the thinking. The moment you get up in the morning, when you get up in the morning, you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do today? Where am I going to go? Who am I going to see? You need to know, well, I know that I'm going to this store, and I know that they put signs up there. So maybe go to another store.
Gotcha.
You know that you're going into a parking lot that you can't, or you've got to pick your kids up at school. These are all the sorts of things that you need to worry about.
Sure.
The way that you dress, right? Of course. So, do you have to wear a baggy jacket today? Or if you just have on something, you're going to do sports and you've got on a t-shirt, dress appropriately. If you're going out socially, you have to think about all of these things. Who's going to be in your car? If you're planning on just running into somewhere, these are the sorts of things you have to think about at all times.
Right.
If you know this afternoon I got to run into so-and-so's house and I've got my kid and their friends in the car, what do I do?
Right.
Or I know that I've got to drop off an envelope at my insurance agent's office. They have a sign up that says you can't bring a gun in. My kids are going to be out in the car. What do I do?
Right.
These are the sorts of things that you have to think about. And if you do, I'm telling you, if people thought about it at the start of the day and then adhered to it, 95% of the problems would be eliminated.
That's great advice.
Yeah, so I just think it's just planning. Really, if you wanted it down to one word, planning.
So, a lot of the questions that I get as an instructor a lot are questions that are like, can I go to a bar with my firearm?
Right. Yes, you can go to a bar with a firearm if you don't drink.
Okay.
Period.
That's pretty
If
simple.
you drink, you cannot. And people say, the one mistake that people make is they think that the breath alcohol content, the BAC for OVIs, so driving under the influence, they think that also applies to their firearms. So if they're under the .08, then they can have their firearm just like they can drive. No, absolutely not. If you have one sip, you cannot have your gun on you. You cannot have access to your gun while you are drinking, period, and that's where a lot of people get into trouble.
Excellent. Now, to kind of piggyback on that, what about if I want to go purchase alcohol?
You can, as long as, but again, greater responsibility means that when you're entering that liquor store, some have signs up, some don't, allowing you to bring a gun or preventing you from it. So it is upon you to look around. And a lot of the store owners, some of them have the big signs that you can easily see. Some don't know any better, and they may just have a little tiny sign up somewhere.
Okay.
All right. That still, means that you can't come in. Now, you may have a good argument later. Your defense lawyer could go in and say, look, you reasonably didn't see this little tiny sign up there. You may win at the end of the day, but you've already lost because you were charged. You've spent thousands of dollars for a defense lawyer just to get out of it. So, again, look everywhere. Take those extra steps. And that also, again, this whole video, when you asked me, and I appreciated, you having me out here, is to eliminate headaches. And that will eliminate if you really are looking around and ask yourself, what do I need to do to not have to see someone like Ian, or one of his colleagues?
Sure.
So,
Well, that plays into what we always talk about, which is situational awareness in general, just keeping yourself out of trouble in the first place. But that adding that to looking for signs and trying to see where you can and where you can't go, I think is important.
Exactly.
And when it comes to picking up or dropping off your kids or just going into the school zone, is there something that we need to know specifically about that?
Sure. So in Ohio, you can have your gun on you if you're a concealed carry. You can have it on you, go through, your kid comes out, kid gets in the car, you leave, you're fine. The law, as you know, just changed now, because before you couldn't go in the school, leave it locked up. Now you can.
Okay.
But make sure, these are, again, the extra steps. Think about, what does that mean to lock it up? Right. Some people say, well, I'll just be right back. They don't lock their car. And you got kids. Kids like to get into things. Make sure that car is really locked. Make sure that that gun is really locked inside of that locked car. These are the sorts of things, again, situational awareness, as you said.
Sure. I think also, to kind of piggyback on that, one of the things I always tell students is to make sure, in my opinion, that you should lock it into an actual metal gun box that's cabled to the frame of the car. Because I think of myself, if someone did break into my car for whatever reason and I have to go down and fill out a police report, personally, I'm going to feel much more comfortable saying, hey, I locked it in a steel box that was cabled to the frame of my car, rather than, I just left it at my center console.
Well, and you bring up a good point, kind of on a broader scale. A lot of people get in trouble when other people take their guns and use them. So someone comes to your house you know, you have a work person or someone comes in and steals it and you just had it laying out in the open. A civil lawyer is probably going to come and bring a suit against you also for making that an accessible firearm. Your kid goes and grabs that, you know, that firearm. You may be not only in criminal, liable criminally, but also civilly. And that's a whole nother aspect that you have to think about. People, you know, when they come to my office, they're in criminal trouble. But oftentimes that's followed by civil as well. And so that's why a lot of things, and particularly when to use your firearm, when to draw it, which we'll talk about, that will help, you know, the viewers to not only stay out of my office, but also out of a civil court as well.
Awesome. Ian, worst case scenario, I mean, the thing that we never want to have to do, but unfortunately that's why we train and do these things, is that someday we may actually have to use our weapon. And in that case, when we do, what do we need to do? What do we need to know?
Okay. I think that what's important to know is that it's rarely black and white.
Okay.
Usually we're dealing in a gray area. And so the best that one can hope is to put themselves in the best situation possible in that gray area, so that when an officer or detective is considering what to do, or the prosecutor's thinking to charge, you're in the best position. But the first thing that you need to do, before somebody breaks into your home, before somebody tries to pull your car door open or hurt one of your loved ones, you have to have gone through that very scenario 1,000 times, Neil, in your mind. What would I do if this happened to me? Because the first time that you have to use your firearm should not be the first time that you've thought about that situation. So again, I think it's planning, preparation, and more planning. So that if you use your firearm, you know, you have to think about, when am I going to use it? Okay, that's number one. Was I reasonable when I used it? Did I reasonably fear for my safety, the safety of my family, or others? Because in Ohio, you have the right not only to protect yourself, but to protect others. Right? But it's got to be reasonable. And then the big question comes, what people ask me all the time, is, well, what do I say when the police come to question me afterwards? And that's a huge topic. So, you know, I'd love to talk about that with you and go over that.
Okay. Well, let's say that I'm in a scenario where I use my weapon. Maybe it was a carjacking, whatever the case is, and now, of course, luckily I'm here and the police arrive. What should I do moving forward? What should I say? What should I be thinking? Is there the first move I should make?
So, you know, I am not a criminal defense lawyer that thinks all police are bad. In fact, I think police, all in all, just like every other profession, are very good. Okay? And I think they are here to protect us, and they are here to help us. I'm not so worried about the police questioning as I am giving the answers just after you just shot someone. Right? It's the middle of the night, or I'm sorry, let's go back to the carjacking. You're in your car, calm, you got the radio going, you're thinking about good things, you're with your loved one, and all of a sudden you got into a situation where you needed to pull your firearm, and we know we never pull it unless we are prepared to shoot and kill someone. So now you have killed someone with it. Your adrenaline, you're going to be in such a distorted, surreal state that it's really unrealistic to think that you're going to even be able to recall exactly what happened the way it happened. And that's why often with police departments we see that in shooting situations they don't give statements, you know, for 1 or 2 days until after the shooting. And so it's unrealistic to think that you or I, after such a situation, are going to be composed enough to sit and say, well, this is what happened, and I felt in fear for my life, and that's why you're going to be beside yourself. Okay? And so because of that, what we always tell people is you just say, officer, detective, I appreciate that you have a job to do, and I fully intend to cooperate. However, I'd like to make my statement with counsel present. Once you say that, the police have to stop. Okay? Afford you the opportunity to get a lawyer. And then once you've gone over that with your lawyer, if they advise you to do so, then you will go in and make that statement. So I never want to see someone make that statement immediately thereafter. I think it's a crapshoot as to what came out of your mouth. Okay? Even if it was a legitimate, justified situation.
This is kind of I don't know if you want to call it a myth, and maybe it's true, I don't know. But I've heard this many times in this scenario where there is a confrontation and the other person, let's say that they they survive,
Right.
and we basically aren't going to say anything in that scenario except what you just advised. But I've been told one of the things that you should say, and you can tell me if you think this is correct or not, is that I make it clear to the officer that, again, that I want to cooperate, but that I am the victim here. And the thought of this, and you tell me what you think, the thought process there is, if I don't say anything at all, and this guy was definitely the scumbag that attacked me, and he says, no, he's the bad guy, meaning me, they're obviously going to arrest me in that case, because what else do they have to go on until they have more evidence of the case? So what do you think about that?
Well, the person who's pointing and saying, it was you, let them say what they're going to say.
Okay.
All right? You can always go back in. You can always give a statement at a later time.
Okay.
All right? So I'm not convinced that that's the way. Okay. Because here's the important thing to think about. You and I are sitting here. We're in your studio. We're, calm. We're talking about this objectively and academically.
Sure.
There's no person sitting here lying bleeding with tons of people around screaming and everything else.
Right.
With your adrenaline, your blood pressure out to here.
Right.
That's a different place. So I would venture to say that the discussions that you had with others probably were in a similar form like this, where we're just debating it back and forth as to what to do. It's all fine and good here, but when you're out in the real world, in the community, and you've, not only have you pulled the gun, there's people, saying, yelling and this and that, and the police lights are all around, whole different situation.
Gotcha.
So the safe play is to not say anything. And just so that everyone knows, your silence cannot be used against you in a court of law. So at a later time, if you end up in court, you've been charged, the same person comes forward and says, he did it. Right? Neil's the one who did it. I'm the victim. He's the bad guy in this whole thing. Well, with your lawyer's guidance, you may have gone in and made a statement at a later time, okay, to kind of dispel that contention, number one.
Sure.
So, number two, let's say that you don't make any statements. The prosecutor cannot get up in front of a judge or jury and say, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Victim over here said that, Neil was the shooter, he was the bad guy, he was the aggressor. And Neil did not make a statement, which must mean that he's guilty. You cannot do that in a court of law. One's silence cannot be used against them. Okay? So that's really important because people get scared because they say, well, if I don't say anything, what's going to happen? It's okay. That's what you get a lawyer for.
That's good to know. It's very good to know. So, Ian, what about scenarios where there's a home invasion? And I get a lot of questions as an instructor of just because someone's in my house, do I have the right automatically to use lethal force?
Automatically, no.
Okay.
All right. The castle doctrine here in Ohio means that we don't have a duty to retreat in our homes, and it extends to our vehicles as well. Okay. But it has to be reasonable. I think the one word that we use in the law all the time is reasonable. It kind of carries through everything.
Sure.
And it holds true here. Were you reasonable? So, sure, if someone comes in the house and they're robbing the house and you see a silhouette in the night and they're coming at you and you shoot, that's likely going to be determined to be a reasonable shooting. Okay. Somebody's in the house, sometimes what we see near college campuses quite a bit are kids who are out drinking at the bars and they kind of are stumbling home and they knock on the door and they come in the house and they go to sleep on the couch. You might get scared to find someone there in the morning sleeping on your couch, okay? But the castle doctrine was not put in place to allow you to go over and grab your gun and shoot them while they're sleeping merely because they're in your house.
Gotcha.
Right? So this is one of those areas where you really are faced with a tremendous amount of gray area. Okay? Again, someone comes in the house, they aim a firearm at you, you can use deadly force, right? Someone comes in, they steal your property, and you see them as they're running out the house.
Sure.
Do not shoot them in the back. That doesn't work here in Ohio.
Okay.
But again, where it comes down to planning, let's extend it now to the vehicle. Somebody comes, and this is one of those things that I'm not going to be able to give an absolute answer right now.
Sure.
You're in your car, and there's a guy behind you that's, felt you cut him off, and he comes up to your car, and he's banging on the window, and he's threatening you, and he's screaming, I'm going to kill you, but his arms are up and out. Do you have the right to shoot him through that glass because you did feel fear? Well, yeah, sure, you were fearful, but chances are that it's not going to be seen as a justifiable shoot, and you may find yourself in front of 12 people determining whether or not that was reasonable. Now, take that same scenario. and the guy goes and grabs the car door open, and that door's open, and he goes to grab you, now that's a different situation. So this is the sort of planning you need. Because, again, under that adrenaline situation, whether or not you're going to make the right call, again, I always like to say, is a roll of the dice.
Sure.
So, make sure that you are thinking as clearly as possible because of the preparation and the planning.
All right, Ian, so pretty common. You're driving around and you get pulled over, okay? But now, of course, we're CHL. We have our firearm with us. And so what's the best advice you want to give us and our viewers when we get pulled over? What should we start thinking about? What should we start doing?
Okay. Best advice for anyone who's getting pulled over, who's got the concealed license, is don't wait until you're asked. We have a duty, remember, a greater responsibility to let the officer know as they're approaching the vehicle, yes, I have a concealed carry permit, I do have a firearm, and this is where the firearm is located. And that should be the very first thing out of your mouth.
Okay.
So the safest way to do it, hands up on the wheel, license in hand, and your concealed weapons license. Mm-hmm. If your license is elsewhere and you've got to fidget around and you're reaching for it, that also can cause an officer some great anxiety and concern. So you may not want to do that. Keep your wallet close. Again, preparation. But if you have your hands up and the officer comes up, first thing I remember said, "Sir, do you realize you were doing 65 and a 55? Okay? I don't care if you were or you weren't. You say, I have a concealed permit. I have a handgun. It's on my side to my right. What would you like me to do?" And that, to me, is the most important thing.
Okay.
We want to empower the police officer because police officers have the worst job. They have to go up time and time again to unknown situations. They don't know who they're coming upon, and all they want to do is make sure they're going home to their family. So I want to make it easy for them, and I want to allow them, by empowering them, to make all the decisions.
There is no such thing as a routine traffic stop. I mean, they have no idea, even by your plates, how do I know that you're in the car? You could have been the guy that just killed somebody and you got nothing to lose at this point. So it's a total crapshoot on what's going to happen and what your intentions are.
That's right. So, you don't have a duty if you're walking down the street and you're passing a police officer, just saying hi. You don't have to say, "Oh, hi, police officer, have a nice day, and by the way, I have a gun on my side." Okay, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
All right? But if they do come up to your car, first thing out of your mouth is just tell them. Now, I have seen situations where the people didn't say it fast enough. And they intended to, but what ended up happening was they engaged in conversation with the police officer first. Police officer say, "How are you?" Say, "Oh, I'm good, I'm fine." Conversation would start, and then they would find out that there was a gun in the car, and that's a problem. Okay, so you want to be careful, and you want to make sure that that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth.
Sure.
An interesting thing also, one of these kind of little side issues that I have seen, if you have more than one car. If you have cars to your business or to your name. So let's say in my household I've got cars under my name for myself and my wife. Okay. When the police officer pulls over my wife, she does not have a concealed permit. Okay. They're going to run that license plate and see that attached to that license is a concealed holder. And now all of a sudden they're going to say to my wife, "Where's the gun, ma'am? Where's the gun?" And then you know that when I get home, I'm going to get it 10 times worse. So if you have those licenses, the plates, and the car's titled to you, make sure that whoever is driving that vehicle knows to say, "This is, the car's titled to my husband. I don't have a firearm."
Right. That's
okay. Right. We want to calm everyone down. We want to assure that police officer that we're not a threat, that they can just give you the ticket and they're going to be able to go home to their family.
Sure. So if I am involved in a situation where I do have to use my gun or lethal force, what are some other benefits of seeking legal counsel?
Sure. So we've talked about how they can guide you into what to say and what not to say and so forth. But going to the lawyer first may prevent you from actually getting charged. And I think it's important to know what happens when someone's charged.
Well, let me ask you that. Why is that? Why would that be? What would be an example of that?
Of what?
Of not being charged because you talked to a lawyer, like because the person would say something they shouldn't have?
Yeah, because the person may have said something that they shouldn't have.
Okay.
Today, one of the things that we have to be aware of today that we didn't, even just a couple of years ago, are the body cams. Everything's on video today. So if you're in a bad situation and you're yelling and you're screaming, or you may be using obscenities, that SOB or this guy, that Well, that doesn't look good. Because the way that you have to act at all times, and not just with firearms, but I tell my clients all the time, live your life asking yourself, would I want this said or seen by a jury of 12? Right?
Very good.
Would you like this repeated in a courtroom? That's how I live. So it's a very paranoid way of living, but it's intended to make sure that it's not repeated in a courtroom.
Sure.
So I think that the lawyer bringing you in, they're going to see all of the evidence that has been gathered by the detectives. You would not have had that vantage point had you just spoken up front. You've now had the opportunity to decompress, fully assess what happened, get your composure back, and go in and be heard. So I think within the criminal system, that certainly helps. And what's important, Neil, to realize is when I keep saying the criminal system. Well, it's important for the viewers to know. If you get charged with a crime, even if it's a misdemeanor, your case is going to take, it's not unusual for it to be longer than 6 months. It could be 6 to 9 months is usually what I say the average case goes. It could be a lot longer. It's expensive. You've sat in jail. Right? If that got any publicity, you're going to lose your job. Even though we're presumed innocent in this country, people respond. I know that when people read the newspaper and they see, oh, this person was accused of doing this, this, and that, most people respond by saying, oh, that person they should throw him away and lock, throw him away and throw away the key, lock him up and throw away the key.
Gotcha.
That's just the way it is. So I don't want anyone to be in a lose situation, even if they're ultimately exonerated. And the stress that it takes on you and on your family, it's immeasurable. Okay. So that's the one aspect. But I think the other part to think about is the civil liability. So you may finish a criminal case, but now you've got to face the civil component. So the best example of that is O.J. Simpson, right? Everybody remembers the case. O.J. was acquitted of the criminal case, but then he got hit for a $30 million verdict in the civil case right thereafter based upon the same facts.
If the glove don't fit,
that's right. That's right. So when we deal in the criminal system, we're dealing with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest standard in the land. That's what we see on television and so forth. When we're dealing with the civil standard, now we're talking a preponderance of the evidence. And what that means is it's just a weighing. 51% versus 49. 51% is the winner, 49. Okay? That's all it takes. And so oftentimes we see lawsuits follow on the tail of a criminal case. Right? And even in the most clear situation of self-defense, someone comes into your house pointing a gun at you and you shoot back, you kill them, you should probably expect that there's going to be a family member somewhere who's going to come forward and say, Johnny was a good guy, and he was there for me all the time, and now Neil's got to pay because he would have never have used that gun in the house anyway. All right? As crazy as that sounds, you may win the civil case too. But now you're 2 or 3 years down the road. You've spent tens of thousands of dollars on civil lawyers. Maybe you had a home insurance policy. Maybe that covered, maybe it didn't, because a lot of times intentional conduct's not covered. You may have a hard time getting insurance in the future. I mean, it's really a major stressor and chapter that's going to be in your life if you have to use your firearm. So it all comes back to the beginning. Make sure that you go through your day and make sure that you practice shooting. One of the other things that I see, people they go to a gun show, they go to the gun store, they shoot at the range, and they buy their firearm because they hit the target, and so therefore they hit the target and they'll be able to defend themselves if they're put in a hostile situation. Police officers have to train all the time. We should too.
Absolutely. You're speaking my language.
Right. I mean, I'm all about the training. If you think that you're going to be able to go into your purse or into your holster and pull out that gun and it's going to be like TV where you can hit the 8 guys in the chest and it's over and everything's fine, you are wrong.
Absolutely.
And so it's all about the training. You're responsible. If someone's coming at you and you're shooting them and you shoot 8 bullets and you hit him once, well, remember, there were 7 other bullets that went around.
Absolutely.
You're responsible for those bullets. And if you hit 2 other people that were bystanders walking, even though you were doing it to defend yourself, you're going to get sued from those people and you're going to have a prosecutor looking at you to determine whether or not you should be charged. Again, even if you win, you lose.
Great point. Ian, so I get a lot of questions, obviously not just with concealed carry, but people in the state of Ohio realize that you can open carry, as far as we know. And so, is that in fact the truth? Can we open carry, and what should we know about that?
Sure. So, Neil, you can carry openly in the state of Ohio. Okay.
Right.
However, what you can do and what you should do sometimes are two different things.
Absolutely.
And the reason that I say that is when you are carrying openly, even though you're in full compliance with the law, we have to remember that not all people like guns. In fact, good number of people hate guns. They're terrified of guns. They don't understand guns.
Are you sure?
I'm a little positive on that one. Yeah. So they see someone walking around with a gun. Well, today all we see on television are instances where people use guns and people are killed and tragedies and crimes all over the place. So for someone who is not a gun person, that may cause them to react. That may cause them to call the police. That may cause them to tell a store owner, whatever it is. So if you
Before you go any further, too, I just want to be clear on this so that you guys understand. In a scenario like that where someone calls the police, just so that we understand the procedures of law enforcement, that's not a call where someone go, I got better things to do. I'm going to have lunch. That is something that they have to go and check out and investigate and close that out. So that's not an optional thing. If someone calls, they are going to go check that out.
Yeah, that would be a high priority call.
Absolutely.
And so they would get there because all they would have, this is what they would hear from the 911 dispatch. They would say, male with a firearm at the store located at such and such. That's all they're going to have to go on. And again, it gets back to police officer wants to keep everyone safe. That's their duty. And they also want to get home to their family safe.
Absolutely.
So if there's no reason to even run the risk of putting everyone in kind of an escalated state, then don't do it, which I think is the beauty of concealed carry.
Sure.
There are a ton of people walking around in the state of Ohio with firearms today, and we don't know it, and everyone's fine with it.
Sure.
I spoke to an officer one time about walking into a McDonald's. I did have my firearm with me that day, and I thought about going in. I was just getting a coffee, and I thought about just leaving my coat in the car. When I walked inside, the police officer was there, and I asked him. I said, let me ask you just a question, just for my own knowledge. I said, had I walked in just openly showing a firearm, what would you have done? And he kind of looked at me for a second, and he said, it depends. It depends what that person, looks like, what they're wearing, so forth. That's a kind of a scary answer because that's rather, it's very subjective. Sure. And it's subject to interpretation all the time. I don't want to be in that situation where someone's evaluating whether or not I'm a threat.
Sure.
If I can put on a coat or a sweatshirt or a T-shirt and carry in a way that I can never be perceived as a threat by anyone, then that's where I want to be.
Yeah, I always say that. I mean, if you're the last person that's getting involved in any situation, you're just buying a pop at the store, and some knucklehead comes in to rob it, and they see you with the gun, you're the biggest threat in that room automatically, whether you want to be involved or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd rather be the person who, obviously, if I wasn't able to get out of there, I want to be the person that is not on anyone's radar in that situation if I have to act.
That's our ace in the hole.
That is.
Yeah. So, Ian, the kind of curtail on one of the things we talked about earlier, which was when we can use our gun, a lot of questions also come up with brandishing, like showing the gun to win an argument or to empower yourself. And so what comes along with all that?
Right. All right. So I think the very first thing that we always have to remember is, we don't pull our gun unless we're prepared to use it. And that means using lethal force, taking someone's life. Yep. All right. There is no room whatsoever for showing your gun to scare people away. Okay. As I had stated at the beginning of our interview, that a lot of people do end up having to hire criminal defense lawyers because they say, this guy was telling me he was going to kick my ass, or he was swerving behind me, he cut me off. And so what happens is most of the time guys will, if they're in the car and someone's trying to cut them off, and they'll take their gun and they'll kind of go like that to show it's there. That's a crime. You will be and should be charged.
Sure.
Period.
Okay.
You're in a store and somebody is in that situation where you're getting pushed, something like that, and you back away and you can leave. Okay,
Sure.
so there's nothing to prevent you from leaving. We don't have castle doctrine, walking around.
Right.
But you say, hey, and you pull this open and say, I'm a concealed carry permit, holder, to scare them to walk them away. You can be and you should be charged.
Sure.
All right. So if you can walk away, walk away. That goes with the greater responsibility. That greater responsibility requires oftentimes a greater maturity.
Sure.
By people. No longer can you get into fights if you're carrying around a gun.
Right.
Right. Period. Don't show it.
Right.
Unless you're prepared to pull it, and don't pull it unless you're prepared to kill someone.
Yep.
And that's why, again, I was really pleased and honored that you had me here, because this is too important.
Sure.
The people that we're talking to, your viewers, are not criminals.
Right.
They're carrying guns to protect themselves against those criminals.
Right.
So it really is, it's a shame and it's a travesty
Sure.
that these good people may end up in a criminal defense lawyer's office when all they did was intend to protect themselves.
Right.
But if they don't take those steps every morning when they get up to plan out their day, go through the potential scenarios in which they may use a firearm,
Right.
and then remind themselves what they would do in the event that they did use their firearm and the police were questioning them.
Sure.
If they don't do all of those things,
Right.
they are setting themselves up for potential failure.
Sure.
And so it may seem a little overwhelming, I got to do all this. And from when we do classes sometimes
Sure.
that, usually a third of the people in the class that went to get their concealed permits, after they, hear us talk about this greater responsibility and all the potential legal pitfalls,
Right.
they say, I don't even want a gun anymore. I'll just keep it at home, end of story. And you know what? I'm glad then.
Sure.
Because those people might have gotten themselves into some hot water unnecessarily. So, is it overwhelming to have to think about all these things? Maybe the first few times.
Sure.
But I have to tell you, after a while, it's second nature. Sure. And that's important to know, is don't be intimidated by it. I can pretty much plan out my day, know where I'm going to be, know where I can and cannot within the first 30 seconds of my day anymore.
Sure.
And that would hold true to anyone who's watching this if they keep practicing and training.
Yeah, I mean, your best intentions can be destroyed by poor planning. Bottom line on that.
Absolutely.
All right, so here's something I think most people don't even think about, but we plan our day and all that kind of good thing, but now we're in a scenario where we had to use our gun. We're going to call 911. Right. What do we say?
That's a great question, because we've talked about what do you say to the police when they come.
Sure.
Right? And I've suggested you not do that because, your mind is not going to be in the right place. Right. Well, now this is even a question that's even closer to the shooting time.
Sure.
So the first thing that you need to remember is that what you say will be introduced in court. 100%. I've never had a murder case where the 911 call didn't come in. Okay? So if you make that call and you say, I shot this guy, and you give all the details, that's going to be considered by the detectives, considered by the prosecutor, and played in court. Okay. So the best thing that you can do is try and gain some composure for a moment, or have someone else call, or what I do oftentimes, if a newspaper calls, something like that, sure. They'll call and they'll say, hey, can I get a statement on this? If I'm caught off guard and I'm just giving a quote to a newspaper, then there should be real concern with, the person who's calling in a 911 call after they just shot and killed someone. Sure. So what I do in those situations is I write down what I would say. And I read that. Okay. Now that's my advice. Some other lawyers may say, no, don't write anything because that may get in and it shows it was too cold and calculated. The point of it is whether you write it, you don't write it. I don't think there's any right or wrong. Okay. Go easy on the details. Okay. What I would say is there was an intruder in my home. I had to defend myself by using a firearm. The person is down. The firearm is in my kitchen on the counter or wherever it is. There are no bullets in it. I've taken the magazine out and I've pulled it and locked back the slide. Make sure that they feel safe coming in. Okay. but don't get on there screaming and swearing and I got him. And I've heard that a lot of times.
Sure.
You know, guy comes in, everything's great. Yeah, and he broke in my house, and you know, I took my gun and I went and this and that. Everything sounds fine. I say, yeah, that sounds like a pretty clean shoot. Then I listen to the 911 tape. He got what's coming to him, and I got him, and I'm not letting him do this to anybody else. And you're just sitting there and you're shaking your head like, because that's going to be Exhibit 1 in the courtroom. Right. So just enough to let them know what happened, to put the officers at ease by letting them know that they're safe. And that's it. And then you get counsel.
Very good.
Okay. I've also had other people in the past, shootings happen, and they've called counsel first. Okay. You know, a lot of people.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think if you can do that, that's your best way to do it.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, but quick, right? We don't want the crime scene investigators coming and saying this body's been here for 4 hours. Right. If you know a lawyer and you have them on your cell phone on speed dial and you get them and you say, you call me up, hey Ian, this is what I had to do. You wake me up at 2 a.m. That's fine. I'm gonna get up and at 2:02, I'm calling the police and I'm gonna say, my client Neil, this is what happened. He had to use the firearm in self-defense, and I'll be in a much better position to report it.
Sure.
All right, so I think one of the things that's important is that one simple question brought out so many potential answers.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
No absolute right or wrong, but less is more sometimes.
Right.
And that's what I see here in response to your question.
Ian, you've been an amazing sport so far, taking the time with us and the viewers.
My pleasure.
But to wrap this all up and in conclusion, is there anything that you'd like to tell the viewers in particular about putting this all together?
Sure. I would love to be able to say that if you do A, then B will happen in a stress or lethal force situation. Unfortunately, the law doesn't permit me to do that because every situation is different.
Sure.
So I would caution the viewers to not look at other situations and say, well, if I were to do that, then I'm going to get the same result. Okay. What we know about the law is that it's inconsistent.
Okay.
Right? Different detectives look at things differently, different prosecutors, different juries. Right? Any veteran lawyer would tell you that they don't know what's going to happen in the courtroom before a jury because we don't even know who the jurors are.
Sure.
Okay? And so it really comes back to just recognizing that, again, it's this more gray area.
Right.
And in order to put yourself in the best possible situation when you're being evaluated by others is preparation, planning, and training. And I don't think that you can do too much of any.
Sure.
So that's what I would end with. I'm certainly happy to, talk to you as things develop in the future and the laws change and situations come up. But I appreciate you doing this because this is really a good way to help good people avoid, bad situations. So you're doing everyone a great service.
Well, that's awesome advice. I appreciate that.
You bet.
Well, and again, I cannot thank you enough, not just for myself, but for all the viewers. I mean, I think
My pleasure.
I think it's going to be hard for them to really realize the value that they're getting from this. It's pretty incredible to have an opportunity to be in front of someone like yourself with your experience and to be able to give them some really sound advice. So I super appreciate that. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks,
And
Neil.
thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Alrighty, guys. Well, there you have it. I hope you got a lot of great information on that. If you liked it, please give myself and Ian a thumbs up. We both appreciate that. You now can find us, of course, on Facebook, Instagram, and, of course, YouTube. Until next time, remember, it's always better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.